Double check you've locked your doors. I live in a student house in a very rough area. The house is very small, so one of the bedrooms is by the front door downstairs, with the other two upstairs. There are 5 of us in total, a couple in the downstairs room, our housemate James, and finally myself and a partner. To give some context, I am quite paranoid. My dad was raised in the Troubles in Northern Ireland and would often share stories of his experiences there. Obviously, he only wanted to teach us how to be safe, but these stories were a lot to take in at a young age and definitely contributed to my paranoia. I struggled to sleep, so I decided to stand in our backyard to have a quick smoke. I checked the gate in our yard was locked so no one from the alleyways could get in, and then I went back inside. No one can climb the walls as the top of them is covered in shattered glass and barbed wire. Fast forward a couple of hours and I had a fairly bad migraine, so both my boyfriend and I decided to try to get some sleep. He fell asleep before me and I sat up restless. I heard the normal sounds of people walking around the house and going in and out of the rooms downstairs. Of course, I thought it was either my roommates or my migraine making me confused. I thought nothing of it and went back to sleep. It felt like hours, but I'd only been asleep for half an hour before I woke up to hammering at my bedroom door. Embarrassingly, I screamed and looked to my boyfriend who was now wide awake. "Calm down, you're fine," he reassured me with a startled look on his face. I figured it was just a nightmare, as it's a pretty common occurrence for me to have with the stories my dad told. That was until I heard James' muffled screams outside my door. "There's call the police." Obviously confused, my partner shouted back to ask what he was saying. "There's some guy in my bed. Call the police right now." He stopped shouting through to us and began screaming at the man in his room. As I mentioned, I'm pretty cautious and often think about the chances of something like this happening. So our room is locked that night, but no one else in the house locks their rooms. I got on the phone with 999 and said that there was a break-in, still half asleep and on the verge of a panic attack. The police response time was amazing, getting here in 10 minutes luckily. This was all while we watched James scream from the hallway. The guy was very clearly off his head. His speech was slurred and he just kept saying, "I'm Nathan, and if I want to kick off, I'll kick off, and that's what I'm doing right now." Honestly, I was expecting him to pull a knife on James, it's that kind of area, or seriously injure someone. Luckily, the police arrived before that could happen. The guy had his jeans on backwards and was swaying back and forth shirtless. He had a nightclub wristband on and a lot of dried, bloody scratches on his chest. The police took him home after 10 minutes of trying to get some sense out of him. When they left, we got to ask James what had actually happened. He told us he woke up and felt something behind him, turning, and could see the very dark silhouette of a man lying in his bed. He pushed him to the floor and jumped over him to get out, and that's when he started screaming. The guy was completely naked besides James in bed until James woke up and screamed and he put clothes on. I know it's not that terrifying of a story considering all, but I can assure you, being woken like that at 3:30 in the morning was terrifying. I dread to think how horrified James was. To make things worse, one of the people downstairs thought they heard noises and assumed it was one of us. So we locked the front and back door to make sure no one could get in. How ironic. A stalker in my midst. To start, I'll tell you I'm a female, and while I was away attending college, I had the unfortunate luck of acquiring stalkers faster than a petri dish develops bacteria. I don't consider myself to be the prettiest or the most popular. I'm actually quite plain and boring. Not into the partying scene or getting guys' numbers, and to be perfectly honest, I can be pretty dense too. Moving on, I was at work like it was any ordinary day. I work in a huge chain department store back in customer service. Here is where a guy caught my eye, not because I thought he was attractive, far from it, but he wouldn't stop leering at me. He hopped lines to get into my queue and waited until it was his turn to approach the counter. He was making a small return and asked me if I had a boyfriend out of the clear blue, which caught me off guard. I was attending college in a town I had no intention of staying in, simply because I'm not fond of city dwelling. I was raised in a no stoplight town where fun on a Friday or Saturday night consisted of sitting in the local bank parking lot and horsing around until curfew. Yes, my hometown had a curfew. You know how sometimes you get a weird sensation in the back of your mind or in the pit of your stomach, and you know something bad is gonna happen? Well, that's what happened when this guy reached my workstation. So to err on the side of caution, I told him I had a fiance back home, even though that was a bold-faced lie. I was very much a single gal at the time and still am. He asked me where my engagement ring was, and I told him it was getting sized. He asked if I wanted to have a little fun. Mind you, I don't know this guy. Then he asked me if I'd ever been with a girl intimately. Like, excuse me, but what business does that have? So after this guy invaded my space and asked me increasingly personal questions, I managed to get him to move along so I could continue helping customers. This went on every day, sometimes even 2 or 3 times a day for right about 2 months. The guy would come in and hound me every single day, and as if that wasn't enough, he got a job at the store I worked at and kept on approaching me, even when we were on the clock. It got to the point where I was growing fearful of his presence because he couldn't take no for an answer. I tried not to let him see what kind of car I drove, but I know he saw it at one time or another. Flash forward to when my stalker gave me his number and asked me if I would go out with him. I reported him to my supervisor, and unfortunately I was told they couldn't fire him simply because he was harassing me. I never revealed where I lived to him, but saw him a few times parked just 2 or 3 houses down from where I lived. Needless to say, I no longer live in that area and no longer work at that establishment, but I always worry he's gonna show up at my new job, even though I'm 3 hours away. Stranger in the night. When I was about 8 years old, I used to sit looking out my window at night, just wondering about things in life like school, friends, girls, and Batman. I know, weird, but anyway, we lived in a 4 apartment building, 2 at the bottom and 2 at the top. We stayed in one of the ones at the top, and when you walk in, you'll enter the living room. Walking past that, you'll enter my mom's room, and then the kitchen, and then the short hallway with the bathroom on the right. After that is the small cutout where the back door is at, and then the back room. So I'm sitting there, always daydreaming or night dreaming, as I should say. And then I heard something jumping our backyard gate. Whatever it was, I couldn't see it because the side my window was on was the apartment side of the building. But not long after hearing the gate, I could see a man in black turned on the side of the building that I'm on, carrying a ladder. So without moving or saying anything, I watched the man put the ladder on the side of the building next to our bathroom window. He climbed up and started using something to scrape the side of the window, like he was going to try and pull the whole window out. I don't know, but what I remember is me running to the room where my mom and stepdad were sleeping, trying to wake them up. I was trying to tell them that somebody was breaking into our house, but my stepdad said, "Boy, take your ass to sleep." I didn't stop shaking my mom, trying to tell her that someone was breaking in. And finally, my mom said, "What if someone is really trying to break in?" and got up to come and look. When we got to my room, she turned on the lights, and I went back to my window and looked out. I thought by her turning on the lights, he would have ran and had been gone. But he wasn't. He was still doing something to the bathroom window, so I pointed and said, "See, there he goes." I turned and looked at my mom, but when she stuck her head out, he was gone. The ladder and thing he had in his hands was laying on the ground. The thing he had was a crowbar. After we called the police, we found that the man had been going around breaking in people's houses, doing horrible things to the woman while the men would be tied up. I thanked my mom for always believing in me enough to check, 'cause who knows how things could have been.